The humans are here. When aliens learn to fear Earth.
The first alert was just a blip, a faint whisper from the void that brushed against our long-range sensors. No one panicked. In a galaxy teeming with wonders and anomalies, you learn not to jump at every shadow. We'd seen ghost signals, solar flares mimicking warp signatures, even rogue asteroids singing strange songs. It was just another Tuesday for the Interstellar Watch Command. Our top xenolinguists and cryptographers got the call, more out of routine than any real sense of urgency. They expected to file a report on another deep space curiosity and go home. But then, the signal answered back. That's when the panic started. It wasn't an answer to our hails or probes. It was a reply to the original whisper, a conversation happening right in our cosmic backyard. This second signal was different. It was old, ancient. So old, our systems struggled to even date it. It was like finding a fossil that was still breathing. The signal carried a weight, an echo of millennia that made the air in the control room feel heavy and cold. It looped, a simple message, just 3 words, repeated over and over again, a chilling mantra broadcast across the stars. The message wasn't complex. There was no grand declaration, no threat of war. It was just a warning, a terrified scream encoded into light and radiation. When our best minds finally cracked it, a silence fell over the command center that was louder than any alarm. 3 words. The humans are here. That's all it said. The humans are here. Think about that for a second. We are humanity. We the ones who just barely managed to crawl out of our gravity well a few centuries ago. We're the newcomers, the galactic toddlers who still trip over our own feet. But this message, it wasn't about us. It couldn't be. The signal's origin dated back further than our recorded history, further than our species was supposed to exist. It was a message from a time before our sun was even a young star. Our first assumption was a translation error. It had to be. Maybe human was a common noun in some long-dead language, meaning destroyer or plague. It was a comforting theory, one that let us sleep for about 12 hours. Then the galactic reports started pouring in. Every civilization, every race that had intercepted that same ancient signal had the exact same translation, and their reaction was universal: mass evacuation. Species we knew to be rivals, who had fought bitter wars for centuries over resources and territory, suddenly signed peace treaties overnight. They abandoned planets, packed up entire star systems, and just left. Fleets of colony ships, dreadnoughts, and civilian transports created stellar traffic jams as they scrambled to get as far away as possible from the signal's apparent direction. They weren't running from a specific enemy they could see. They were running from a ghost story, a legend so terrifying that the mere mention of its name was enough to shatter empires. And the name of that ghost story was human. We tracked the fleeing civilizations. They all moved away from one specific quadrant of the galaxy, a quiet, unremarkable spiral arm. Our spiral arm. We cross-referenced their flight paths, triangulating the point of origin. They were all so desperate to escape. The focal point they were running from, it was a small, blue and green planet. A world orbiting a G-type main sequence star. A world marked on every ancient, terrified star chart with a symbol of dread, a warning of cosmic plague. A world they had labeled, in stark blood-red letters, Earth. So, here we are. The universe is emptying out, running from a boogeyman that shares our name, and we're sitting right in the middle of its supposed lair, with no memory of our ancient, terrifying past. The question is no longer, are we alone in the universe? The question is, what did we do to make everyone else so afraid of us? What history is buried so deep that even we have forgotten it? And what happens when the rest of the galaxy realizes the humans never left? We've been here all along. From the bridge of the starship Harbinger, Earth hung in the void like a forgotten jewel. It was silent. Utterly, unnervingly silent. We'd been monitoring it for weeks, scanning every frequency, every band, every whisper of the electromagnetic spectrum. Nothing. The cacophony of a civilization of billions had vanished. No satellites blinked in orbit. No radio chatter bounced off the ionosphere. No city lights painted the continents. It was as if humanity had simply been erased. The Council of Galactic Expansion was relieved. Their initial reports had painted a picture of a volatile primitive species, dangerously unpredictable. But now, they saw a ghost world. A graveyard, the commander called it, his voice echoing with finality in the sterile confines of the bridge. A prime piece of real estate, ripe for the taking, its previous tenants having conveniently vacated. The mission was simple: land, assess, and prepare for colonization. A formality. I was part of the first landing team, Alpha Squad. Our shuttle cut through the atmosphere, the heat shields glowing a fierce orange, but inside, the mood was almost casual. We were janitors, here to sweep up the dust of a dead culture. We touched down in the heart of what their maps called New York City. The landing was perfect, a gentle kiss on a silent street. When the ramp lowered, the air that rushed in was clean, crisp, almost sweet. To clean, stepping out was like stepping into a photograph. The towering skyscrapers were pristine, their glass facades reflecting a cloudless sky. Vehicles were parked neatly along the curbs, not a scratch on them. Storefronts displayed their wares behind immaculate windows. It wasn't a ruin. It wasn't a wasteland. It was a city, holding its breath, waiting for its people to return. But where had they gone? There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no remnants of a plague, no fallout from a war. We swept through apartments, offices, and subways. We found tables set for dinner, food still on the plates. We found computers left on, their screens glowing with half-written emails. We found toys scattered across living room floors. It was a snapshot of a billion lives, frozen in a single, inexplicable moment. The sheer absence of people was more terrifying than any army we could have faced. Then, we started noticing the footprints, fresh ones. In the dust that had begun to settle on every surface, there were clear, distinct prints. Humanoid, but not quite human. They were everywhere, leading in and out of buildings, crisscrossing the empty streets. It was as if a silent, invisible population was walking amongst us. We were not alone. The feeling of being watched became a palpable weight on our shoulders. My team was clearing a massive structure they called a library. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams, slanting through the high windows. The silence here was different, heavier. It felt ancient. That's when we saw them. At first I thought they were just marks on the wall, some kind of strange architectural design. But as I ran my gloved hand over the surface, I felt the grooves. They were scratches. Deep, frantic gouges in the stone and metal. We followed them. They were on the walls, the floors, even the ceilings. And they all had one thing in common. They were on the inside of the buildings. Scratches on the inside of sealed vaults. Scratches on the interior of elevator shafts. Scratches on the inner surfaces of locked, airtight rooms. It was the mark of something trying to get out, or something trying to keep others from getting in. A chill, colder than the vacuum of space, crawled down my spine. We looked at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What could scratch solid steel from the inside? What kind of civilization builds its own cages? The council thought this was a graveyard world. They were wrong. It's not a graveyard. It's a prison. And we just opened the door. The footprints outside weren't from the inhabitants. They were from the guards. And now, they're gone too. We are inside, and the silence is no longer empty. It's listening. The logs from the exploration vessel Odyssey were supposed to be our first contact with the past. For 200 years, we traveled the silent void, searching for the home world, for Earth. We found it. Shrouded in an eerie quiet, its cities dark, its airwaves dead. We sent down the probes, the rovers, the explorers. For weeks, nothing. Just ghost towns and empty highways, reclaimed by nature. We were beginning to think some plague, some ecological collapse had done it. Then, they found the archive. It wasn't a government bunker or a military installation. It was a small, hardened data server buried beneath a library in what was once called New York City, and on it, recordings. The last recordings of humanity. We gathered in the Odyssey's command bridge, the whole crew, watching the holographic display flicker to life. The first face was a scientist, gaunt, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended time. Log date. Irrelevant, she started, her voice trembling. If you're watching this, you've come looking for us. Turn back. We opened a door we shouldn't have. We reached out, thinking we were alone. The scene cut. Now, a soldier in a makeshift bunker, explosions rattling the camera. We called them the listeners. They don't want our resources. They don't want our territory. We tried to communicate, to surrender. He let out a harsh, desperate laugh. You can't surrender to a storm. They don't fight wars anymore. Wars have a purpose, an end. This is a harvest. Another cut. A young woman, hiding in a subway tunnel, her face illuminated only by the light of her recording device. She was whispering, barely audible. We broadcasted everything. Our art, our music, our love, our conflicts. We thought it would show them who we were, but all they heard was a dinner bell. The image distorted, filled with static. They move in the silence, she whispered. They mimic sounds, voices. Don't make a sound. The final recording was from a handheld camera, shaky and panicked. It was moving through a darkened house. All we could hear was the frantic, heavy breathing of the person holding it. They were running, stumbling over overturned furniture. They burst into a closet, pulling the door shut, plunging the view into near-total darkness. The breathing was ragged, interspersed with choked sobs. Then, the breathing stopped. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute silence. My heart was pounding in my chest. Every crew member on the bridge held their breath. And then, from the darkness, a sound emerged. It wasn't human. It was a soft, dry whisper. A sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It was right behind the camera, right in that closet. It whispered 2 words, perfectly mimicking the voice of the scientist from the first recording. We're listening. The recording cut out. The bridge was silent. But it wasn't the silence of space anymore. It was the silence of a hunting ground. The silence of something waiting, something listening. The red alert light on the comms panel began to blink. An incoming signal, not from Earth, from somewhere behind us, in the deep, dark void we'd just traveled. And it was getting closer. The first contact was not what we expected. It wasn't a grand arrival, no shimmering ships or messages of peace. It was silence. It began on Outpost Epsilon, a lonely rock at the edge of known space. We'd been tracking an anomaly for weeks, a vessel of unknown origin, drifting silently. We hailed it. No response. So, we sent a team. That's when we saw them. Tall, slender beings in what looked like biological armor. They were armed, but they didn't fire. They just watched. Our commander, Captain Eva Rostova, gave the order to send one of our own across. Sergeant Miller. He was our best, a veteran of a dozen zero-G operations. He floated across the void, a tether connecting him to us, a bridge between 2 species. He reached their airlock, and for a moment, history was being made. Then, it happened. He was just gone, pulled into the dark of their ship. There was no sound, no weapon discharge, no cry for help, not even a whisper over the comms. His tether went slack, drifting aimlessly. A few seconds later, a crimson cloud bloomed from their airlock, drifting in the silent horror of zero gravity. It was Miller's blood. Panic erupted on the bridge of the Chimera. We scrambled for answers. What happened? Report. Rostova's voice was iron, but you could hear the tremor beneath. The tech teams went to work. Thermal scans show nothing. Captain, it's like their ship is a dead zone. Another voice chimed in, frantic. Motion scanners they're glitching, showing movement everywhere, then nowhere. It's impossible. We replayed the footage from Miller's helmet cam, frame by agonizing frame. The last thing it recorded was the alien ship's inner door sliding open into pitch blackness. In one frame, there was nothing. In the next, Miller's view was chaos, a blur of motion before the feed cut. We slowed it down, enhanced it, ran every diagnostic we had. We spent hours staring at those final milliseconds of footage, trying to decipher the impossible. Then, a junior analyst, her face pale, pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "Look," she whispered. "Watch the blink indicator on Miller's HUD." We all leaned in. The indicator flashed, a normal autonomic response. In the single frame where his eyelids were closed, the empty doorway was no longer empty. A shape, a nightmarish silhouette of claws and teeth, was there. The next frame, as his eyes opened, it was gone, and so was he. We watched it again and again, our blood running cold. Every time the blink indicator flashed, the darkness moved. Forms appeared and vanished in the space between heartbeats. They weren't just fast. They were beyond our perception, existing in the slivers of time our eyes couldn't process. The final report from the Chimera, before it too went silent, was short. A single, terrifying sentence transmitted on a loop until the signal died. It's a message that now haunts the sleep of every soldier in the fleet, a chilling warning whispered across the stars. First contact initiated. Sergeant Miller is gone. The aliens, they move when we blink. We are no longer alone in the universe. And our first neighbors are the stuff of nightmares. We thought we were the predators, the explorers, pushing into the dark. The Galactic Council chamber was silent, an ocean of 1,000 worlds holding its collective breath. For centuries, the question had echoed through the cosmos. What happened to humanity? Where did they go? They had vanished from their home world, Earth, leaving behind only silent, empty cities and overgrown plains. Some whispered of a plague, others of a self-inflicted apocalypse. The most fearful theory was that they had been consumed by a predator so powerful, so absolute, that not even a whisper of their fate remained. The Council demanded answers. They poured resources into searching, sending probes to the farthest reaches of known space. And finally, after generations of silence, they got something back. Not from the void between stars, but from Earth itself. A single, powerful transmission, cutting through the static of the dead planet. On the main view screen of the Council chamber, a face appeared. It was humanoid, but disturbingly different. The features were elongated. The skin seemed to shimmer with an internal light. And the eyes. Oh, the eyes held the depth of ancient nebulae, swirling with colors no one had ever seen. The being was calm, but a profound weariness clung to it, a sorrow that felt as old as time itself. It spoke, its voice a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the very deck plates of the chamber. "We have heard your calls," it said, the words forming in the universal trade tongue, yet carrying an accent of ages. "You ask where the humans went. You search for our graves among the stars." The being leaned slightly forward, its expression shifting to one of deep, almost painful, regret. "We didn't leave Earth. We never left." A murmur swept through the assembled delegates. What could this mean? The planet was scanned daily. It was lifeless, a tomb. "You have spent so long looking out," the being continued, its gaze seeming to pierce through the screen, meeting the eyes of every delegate in the hall. "You never thought to look closer, to look in between. We evolved. We shed our physical limitations, the clumsy shells of flesh and bone that tied us to one reality, one perception." The image on the screen flickered, and for a split second, the chamber saw not the ethereal being, but a ghost of what it once was. Simple human face lines of stress around its eyes, a look of grim determination. Then, it stabilized back into the shimmering form. "You developed ships to cross the void. We learned to step through it. You built weapons to shatter planets. We learned to unmake the very idea of a threat. We are all around you, even now. In the space between atoms, in the echo of a thought, in the shadow that flickers at the edge of your vision." Fear, cold and sharp, began to replace the confusion in the council hall. The whispers grew louder, colored with panic. Monsters, abominations. They hadn't died out. They had become something far more terrifying. The being on the screen seemed to hear their unspoken thoughts. Its features hardened, the ethereal light in its skin dimming. "You call us monsters," it stated. The words no longer a hum, but a sharp, cutting edge. "You, who would have brought your wars to our doorstep. You, who saw our relative weakness and saw not a species to nurture, but a resource to exploit. We saw the path you were on. We saw the future you would create." It leaned closer, its face filling the entire screen, those swirling, ancient eyes locking onto them with an unnerving intensity. "We are your neighbors. We are the ghosts in your machine. We could have unwritten your existence with a single, unified will. We could have erased your histories, silenced your stars, but we didn't." A final heavy pause hung in the air, thick with unspoken power. We simply stepped aside. We removed ourselves from your path, from your sight, from your grasp. "You call us monsters." A faint, sad smile touched its lips. "We call this mercy." The transmission cut out, leaving the council chamber in stunned, absolute silence, with nothing but the chilling echo of that final word, and the terrifying realization that humanity had unvanished at all. They had become the unseen gods of their own universe, and the rest of the galaxy was living in it, completely at their mercy. Have you ever wondered why, in a galaxy teeming with life, no one ever comes to visit? Why the cosmic silence is so deafening? The answer isn't what you think. It's not because we're alone. It's because they're afraid of us. When humanity first reached for the stars, the galaxy held its breath. They expected fleets of warships, grand armies, and declarations of conquest. They were prepared for a fight, for a new empire to rise from the mud of a forgotten world. But that's not what happened. There were no grand battles, no conquered planets, no treaties signed under duress. There was just silence. A scout ship from the Cathar Dominion, a race of insectoid warriors, vanished near our solar system. Then a Grolian diplomatic convoy, known for its impenetrable shields, simply ceased transmitting. One by one, any who approached with ill intent just disappeared. No debris, no distress calls, just an eerie void where a starship used to be. The galaxy began to whisper. They started connecting the dots. The silence always began after contact with the strange, soft-skinned primates from the third planet. The few who survived, the ones who turned back just in time, told stories that sounded like fever dreams. They didn't speak of massive armadas or super weapons that could crack a planet. They spoke of something far more terrifying. They spoke of shadows that moved with intelligence, of voices that echoed directly in their minds without a source, of feeling a sudden, overwhelming sense of being watched, analyzed, and utterly understood by a predator they couldn't see. One survivor, a Skrillian captain, managed to get his ship away. His report was classified at the highest level, but fragments leaked. He described his vessel, a marvel of engineering, suddenly going dark. His crew, warriors bred for generations, were paralyzed by a fear they couldn't comprehend. He said he felt a presence, an intellect so vast and ancient, it was like staring into the heart of a black hole. And in that moment of pure terror, he felt something else, something that broke his mind. He felt pity. The predator felt sorry for him. You see, humanity never needed to conquer the galaxy. We didn't build fleets to blot out suns because we had something better, something older. We are not the masters of our world. We are its caretakers. And we learned from the true masters. We learned from the things that lurk in the deep trenches of our oceans, from the whispers on the wind in ancient forests, from the uncanny feeling of being watched in an empty room. Humanity didn't evolve alone. We coexisted with horrors that the rest of the galaxy couldn't even imagine. Our minds were forged in a crucible of cosmic dread, right here at home. The other species fight with lasers and plasma. We fight with fear itself. We don't send armies, we send a nightmare. We can collapse a civilization's morale from light years away. We can turn a general's own mind against him, make him see betrayal in the eyes of his most loyal soldiers. We don't need to destroy their ships. We just need to convince them to turn around and never come back. Our greatest weapon isn't a bomb. It's a story, a whisper, a doubt planted in the heart of an empire. So when you look up at the night sky and see that big blue marble hanging there, that planet so many think we abandoned or ruined, know the truth. Earth isn't a forgotten cradle of civilization. It's not a ruin. It's a warning sign. It's a preserve. It's a cage. We keep our planet safe, not just for us, but to keep the things that live here, with us, contained. The galaxy doesn't fear our store ships. They fear what we might unleash if they push us too far. They fear the day we stop being the caretakers and decide to let our pets off the leash. The silence isn't empty space. It's the sound of an entire galaxy holding its breath, praying we never have a reason to get angry. For eons, the galaxy whispered tales of a distant, blue world. A cradle of life, they called it. Quaint, primitive. The whispers carried warnings, of course. Stories of a species that clawed its way to the top of its own food chain, that tamed fire and split the atom before it even learned to live in peace with itself. The Galactic Council dismissed them as myths, cosmic ghost stories told around stellar nurseries. They were a young race, confined to their single star system. What threat could they possibly be? They sent probes, not as reconnaissance, but as a welcome gesture. Simple radio waves carrying greetings and star charts, an invitation to join the cosmic community. They received nothing back but silence. Years turned into centuries. The galactic archives grew thick with observations of this peculiar species. They watched as the humans fought, rebuilt, and fought again. Their technological leaps were staggering, erratic, and often born from conflict. They went from primitive rockets to interstellar travel in the blink of a cosmic eye. It was unsettling. The council issued a quiet directive. Observe, but do not engage. Let the children play with their dangerous toys. They'll either destroy themselves or mature. It was a gamble they felt confident in making. After all, the galaxy was vast, and its established powers were ancient and wise. The first real warning came from the Cygnus sector, a peaceful, silicon-based civilization known for their crystalline cities and telepathic art vanished. Before their collective consciousness went dark, a single, fragmented thought echoed across the psychic network. Blue suns, metal ships, they consume everything. The council was concerned, but attributed it to a stellar phenomenon, a rogue nebula perhaps. It was easier than confronting the alternative. Then came the Orion Spur, a warrior race. The Klaxons, proud and strong, were reduced to cosmic dust. Their final, desperate broadcast wasn't a call for aid, but a scream of disbelief. They spoke of ships that moved like ghosts, weapons that unmade reality, and a ferocity that bordered on religious zeal. The pattern became undeniable. Sector by sector, world by world, the galaxy began to fall silent. The warnings grew more frantic, more desperate. Don't fight them, one transmission begged. They learn from every battle. They adapt faster than you can think. They turn your strengths into their weapons, another reported. Their ships aren't just vessels. They're extensions of their will. They don't just defeat you, they erase you. The galaxy was slow to unite. Eons of peace had made them complacent. They debated, they formed committees, they sent diplomatic overtures into the encroaching void. They tried to understand what the humans wanted: wealth, territory, knowledge. They failed to grasp the simple, terrifying truth. The humans weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were an immune response. They saw the galaxy not as a community to join, but as a threat to neutralize. Every alien species was a potential virus, every new technology a potential weapon against them. Their history had taught them one brutal lesson: the only way to ensure survival is to be the only one left standing. Their expansion wasn't driven by greed, but by a deep, primal, and unyielding paranoia that had been forged in the crucible of their own violent world. They didn't want to rule the galaxy. They wanted to sterilize it. And so, it came to pass. The last bastions of galactic civilization, huddled together in the Andromeda core, watched as the darkness at the edge of their sensors swarmed with human fleets. The ships weren't just metal anymore. They were biomechanical horrors, integrated with the technologies of 1,000 fallen races, twisted to serve a single, relentless purpose. It was on that final day that the broadcast went out. A single, automated message, transmitted from the ruins of the Galactic Council's capital, repeated on all frequencies until the power finally failed. It echoed across the silent, empty star lanes, a final testament to a galaxy that had misunderstood everything. The message was simple: the humans are here. But everyone who heard it, in their final moments, understood. This time, it wasn't a warning, it was an obituary. For everyone else. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this cosmic horror story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the void.